Hello, everybody. This is CJ Wiley back with more adventures on the road. I've told a lot of stories about victories, but there's also been times that I was hustled myself. And there's one man that I credit for keeping me from being hustled a lot more times. And his name is Harley from Jacksonville, Florida. I actually saw Harley a few months ago down there, and if you ever get a chance to meet him, I would highly recommend hearing his stories. He's got 1,001 stories on the road, and he's very, very knowledgeable and been around a lot of the same people that I have, but in a different way. He was usually in with them, and I was usually against him. So both angles are good for your overall understanding and knowledge about how the pool hustler mind works, and really this translates to any kind of hustle. I mean, I see them in the business world on many different levels, all the way up to the top. The billionaires are some of the greatest hustlers. They got access to so much money and are able to be very clever and tricky on how they manipulate the mind and get the outcomes that they want. Anyway, when I first met Harley, I was in Dallas, Texas, at a pool room called Rusty's, which was on Northwest Highway, and a small room, but lots of action, and you never knew who was going to be in there at any given time. Frisco Jack hung around there a lot, and I remember he played Bugs some one pocket when I was there. That was fascinating because they were both masters of the game, but had different styles. Jack was an incredibly good strategist. His moving ability and his mind was just brilliant. And Bugs, on the other hand, was a shot maker, especially with his banks. He was able to make just about any bank, and if he didn't make it, he'd hang it in his pocket. And it was really interesting and entertaining for me to see the contrast between their styles. But I went into Rusty's one day, and there was a guy back on the corner table practicing by himself. A non-assuming guy. He looked like he might be a truck driver or a farmer or something like that. He sure didn't look like a pool player. So I went up to him and asked him to play, and he said, "Oh, I know who you are. I can't play you." He says, "I love to gamble," he said, "but you'd have to give me a big handicap." So we negotiated back and forth, and we agreed on him getting the 6 ball, playing 9 ball. So I was only 19 years old, I believe, and the one thing about me, I was always all in. I could never leave the pool room with money in my pocket, it seemed like, or until everybody quit, and I would line them up and play. And the upside of this is I developed a tremendous amount of stamina and killer instinct. On the downside is there was a few times where I would lose all my money. And luckily back then there was so much gambling, it was pretty easy to get pumped back up. So Harley and I started playing, and it just didn't seem like the balls were rolling right for me. It just seemed like I was always in some kind of weird predicament. And of course I didn't realize that he was actually, a master strategist himself, and he was stalling with me. And he was just playing good enough to win. And in doing that, just had me in strange predicaments all the time. It seemed like the balls were always where I couldn't run out, or, he made a lot of combinations on the 6 ball, and I didn't realize it, but he was hustling me. So anyway, I ended up losing about $1,200, and I had jewelry, I had a necklace and diamond rings and stuff like that I had, accumulated. So when he beat me out of all my money, I told him I wanted to put up my jewelry to play some more. And he shook his head. He said, "Kid," he says, I don't want your jewelry. And I said, oh, come on. I said, and I started making my case on why he should play. So he motioned me over kind of in private, and he said, listen, son. He looked me right in the eye, and I could tell his demeanor changed, where he was no longer trying to hustle me, but give me sound advice. And I listened, and he said, son, you can't beat me playing this game. He says, I know you think you can. He said, but you can't. He says, I won your money, fair and square, but I'm not going to take your jewelry. He said, I've got, my code that I go by, and I'm not going to beat a man out of his jewelry or his pool stick. So then he reached in his pocket, and he says, I know you don't have any money, and you probably don't want to ask. He says, but here's $100. He says, I want you to go home to your hotel, get some sleep. Tomorrow's another day. He says, come back in, and you'll find a way to get pumped up again. So begrudgingly, I put my cue stick away, and I went back to my hotel, and I got some sleep, got up the next day, had some breakfast, went right back to the pool room, and I only had like $60. So I started playing a guy for 20 a game, and ended up beating him. And then I played another guy, some $100 sets, turned into $200 sets. And before I knew it, or they knew it, I was up to about 16 or 1700. And the guy that I was playing finally had enough, and he quit. And I hadn't noticed before, but I looked over on the bar stool, and there was Harley looking at me with a smile on his face. I looked over at him, and I put my hand over my chest, which means George, which means good, and nodded at him, and he just looked at me and winked. And that was about all the communication that I needed, man. So, Harley, he taught me that I'm never going to be the smartest guy in the room, and maybe not the smartest guy at the table. But I do have the ability to recognize when things aren't right, and I have the free will to not play. And that's come up many times since then, and probably saved me a lot of money. So anyway, there's a lot of wisdom in those pool rooms, especially back then when you were dealing with people that really understood the art of the hustle. If you like my stories, you want to learn more about my systems, techniques, and fundamentals, join me at my private website, www.masteringpocketbilliards.com. And since I can't physically be your road partner, I'll be your road partner on that website and show you what I learned from all these top-notch road players and tournament players to become number one. If you like this story, I'll see you next time.